now retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano. He's also the Vice President for Foreign Policy and Defense Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Also joining us is Texas Congressman Brian Babin. Gentlemen, so yesterday, at the UN, the President pledged billions of dollars of cash for countries so they can spend that on climate change, and House Democrats are scrapping funding for the Iron Dome. Congressman Babin, first to you on this one. You know, we see this, too, as the new Iranian president had this specific message for America. From the capital to Kabul, one message was clear to the world. The U.S. hegemonic system has no credibility, whether inside or outside that country. I mean, there's such a thirsty effort from this administration to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal. They seem to be willing to take this open abuse, this verbal abuse from the Iranian regime.
Oh, without question. I mean, it's an ideological bent that the Democratic Party, I should call them the new Socialist Democratic Party, seems to have discovered here over the last year or so. And as you said, the Democrats are willing to hold government funding hostage until Pelosi removes support for the Iron Dome, $1 billion for our greatest ally in the region, Israel, which gives Hamas the freedom to lob rockets into unprotected Israeli neighborhoods. And she did it. It's incredible. I never thought I would see this. And quite frankly, the dog, which I call the Democrat Party, is being wagged by the tail, which is the AOC squad. I call them the Hamas caucus now, when they were successful in removing $1 billion. And quite frankly, the Democrat leadership will bend the knee to this radical request. I don't know where the line or where it will be drawn. But they've actually sided with Islamic terrorists over our best ally in the region, Israel. It's hard to even imagine. We have far fewer Jewish members of our caucus on the Republican side than they do on the Democrat side, and yet the best ally and the best friend they have in Congress is the Republican caucus. And it's stunning for me to even contemplate that.
It is that, and on your screen right now, folks, we see Senator Rick Scott and other Senate Republicans talking right now at a press conference. We have our producers monitoring that, but I want to continue this conversation now with James. You know, this Iron Dome defense system has been so successful protecting Israel from these missile attacks. Why is this advantageous? I know this seems like an obvious question for a lot of our audience, but I think it's worth asking just to underscore this fact. Why is this so important that U.S. taxpayer dollars help out our ally Israel when it comes to the Iron Dome?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, and it gets to the other key issues. So on the one hand, we have, which is really the change in the American political system, which is that the left has become a coalition party, and that part of that coalition, this was predicted after the election, they're okay with the Islamists running this part of the world. They're okay with empowering Hamas and Hezbollah, and they're an enemy of Israel. And they have become like the new black hole, pulling the left into a foreign policy which is actually detrimental to the United States because we're endangering our key ally in the region. Iron Dome actually limits conflict because the other side, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran, they fire missiles at Israel as a way of being demonstrative of their anger and their frustration at Israel. Because the Israeli government has the capacity to shoot those missiles down before they kill innocent Israeli civilians, whether they are Palestinians or Arabs or Jews, because the government can do that, they don't have to actually invade these places to take out the missile firing platforms. So there are many times that without Iron Dome, in order to protect the Israeli people, and in order to actually not get voted out of power, they would have had to be invading Palestine, invading Syria, invading Lebanon. But because they can defend against them, they can show a measure of restraint. And by taking Iron Dome off the table, what you would do is actually making war in the region more likely.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk to you guys about is the situation at our southern border. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas yesterday was grilled by Ron Johnson on the numbers specifically. And here's that exchange.
1.3 million people. How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
For me.
Why don't you have that basic information?
And to that, we didn't get a good answer. Now, Congressman Alejandro Mayorkas is back on the Hill today. Some of your House colleagues are going to get a second chance. Do you think he has those numbers today?
He better have them today. I'll tell you, what we've been hearing are simply outright lies coming from Secretary Mayorkas and the Biden administration. And I, for one, feel that Secretary Mayorkas is an utter failure. He doesn't come clean with the American people. He doesn't come clean for the members of Congress who has oversight over his over DHS. And they are simply disobeying the law. They're missing in action. And over again, we've heard these lies, and our southern border is now out of control. We've got thousands of people under a bridge in a small town on the border now, Del Rio. I'm the co-chairman of the House Border Security Caucus. We had Sarah Carter on yesterday, virtually from that area. And she said it's a powder keg underneath there. I've gotten calls from constituents and people that I know and trust real well that they're literally groups and hordes of Haitians that are walking up and down highways in South Texas right now. And so, you know, if Biden doesn't want to see America to see his border crisis, he needs to come clean. And it's hard to imagine why Haitians are being, a very small number of them, admittedly, are being deported. But why not the other?
That looks like just a show. I mean, that, considering the mass numbers, it looks like just a show. And you know, James,
is our first line of defense.
Right, James. When you look at this from a national security standpoint, you know, you hear this concern from Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas about our Border Patrol agents and their horse tack gear. That seems to be their main area of focus. But you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no big issue, 10 being just a flashing red light for issues, how big of a national security issue is this from your perspective?
Well, I think this has become the most significant homeland security issue that we have in the country today. Look, if I were advising a terrorist group, and we know that they're resurgent now in Afghanistan and other places, because the Taliban has inspired them and they provided a safe haven for them to operate from, to begin the planning for the next 9/11. And they have to do that. This is how they're going to regain their honor and their respect. Look, I would say is, look, don't try to recruit people here to do it. They might get caught by the police or something. Train a team. It's not that hard. I mean, the guys that did 9/11, they were, you know, superstar terrorists. They were just yahoos that had a very simple plot. Train your team and have them walk in through Mexico, because they're virtually guaranteed to be able to walk in this country. And the U.S. government will probably take them to their destination of choice. Yeah. So I think it's wide open. And because literally we have millions, and this will become, if they pass amnesty, tens of millions of people illegally entering the country every year that we have no idea who they are. That is the easiest haystack for a needle to get lost in.